Hello my sweet bestie angels, welcome back. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I haven't done this before, but if you guys like it, we could make it a bit of a series. We'll see. I feel like sometimes you read a book and you have the best reading experience, you fall in love with it, and you just want to find another book that will make you feel the same. And so in today's video, I thought we could do if you liked this book, try this book. So we're going to talk about maybe like a more popular book, and then I'll give you maybe a somewhat less popular book. I mean, some of these I'm sure you've heard of, but I'll give you another book that I think has some type of similarities to it. Maybe it made me feel the same, maybe it has some similar tropes, maybe it has somewhat of a similar plot, and I'm just hoping that I can give you guys some recommendations based on books that you already love. Starting off with one that I think is pretty obvious in my opinion. If you read and loved Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young, I think you should pick up Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. These are both accidental pregnancy books, and I wouldn't have thought that that is a trope that I would enjoy, but both of these books were 5-star reads for me. They are definitely different, but they do have some similarities. So in Out on a Limb, Win and Bo have a one-night stand at a Halloween party. They don't really think much of it, but then Win falls pregnant, and obviously she tells Bo, and now they are on this weird kind of like, we're not even friends, we're basically strangers, but now we're having a baby together, and we want to be there for each other, and we want to be there for our child, but we are literally strangers. So they have this very interesting dynamic, and that's somewhat similar to Ready or Not, because in this book we are following Eve, who again has a one-night stand with a guy in a bar, and she falls pregnant and she totally wasn't expecting to, and now she has to figure out what she's gonna do. And this one's a little bit different because there are two guys involved. There is the guy that she hooked up with, had a one-night stand with, and there is also another guy who is more of like just a friend who's always been in her life, but somehow kind of just like steps in a little bit more during this time in her life. So she has a lot of decisions to make. Her life is changing in the same way in this book. Win's life is just changing so much. They are both entering this very unexpected and new season of life, and they're also falling in love. And whilst at the core of it, these books have a similar plot line, they do not feel the same to me at all. There's just a different dynamic. The characters are very different. The dynamics are different. The romances are different. And I think if you enjoyed Out on a Limb, you definitely need to read Ready or Not, because Ready or Not was one of my favorite books from last year. Actually, so was Out on a Limb. But I don't know. I just think if you liked one, you'd probably like the other. Next up, we have The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And I think if you liked this, you definitely need to read None Shall Sleep. These are both YA thrillers, and they actually have a very similar premise. So I don't know why I don't hear more about this. I definitely hear about it, you know, now and then, but I feel like I've heard so much about this, but not nearly as much about this. They're both part of series as well. I think the third book in this series is actually coming out this year. But in The Naturals, we are following a group of teenagers who team up with the FBI to look into cold cases. And each of the teenagers in this group has some sort of like special gift or talent. And so there's like a reason why the FBI wanted them. And it's honestly fascinating. So fast paced, so easy to read. Definitely recommend this. But if you've read this already and really enjoyed it, None Shall Sleep also follows a couple of kids who have been recruited by the FBI because of their like special skills and or talents. Again, these books are really fast paced. In this one, the kids definitely get a little bit too involved in these cases. I think in both series, they start off with cold cases and then they end up moving into cases that are like currently happening, if I'm remembering correctly. But yes, very similar setup, but the books themselves, the characters themselves, the storylines are very different. So I think if you liked this, you might like this. If you have read Indigo Ridge by Devney Perry, or honestly any of Devney Perry's books, I think you should try Something from Catherine Cowles. This is the first book in the Tattered and Torn series, but she has a bunch of other series as well, and they all kind of follow a similar kind of vibe, I would say. If you haven't heard of Indigo Ridge, this book is a small town romance with a suspense element. So our female main character in this book is a police officer, and she's trying to solve a bit of a mystery whilst also falling in love. And Catherine Cowles also writes small town romances with some sort of suspense or mystery element, and both of these authors tend to write like shorter romances, so they're very quick and easy. They are the perfect palate cleansers. I honestly think if you like Devney Perry, you would definitely like Catherine Cowles. They give very, very similar vibes to me. Again, you could probably start any of her series. I've read the Tattered and Torn series and then also the Sparrow Fall series and recommend them both. I feel like I bring up Catherine Cowles a lot, but I just feel like she is kind of underrated. I don't hear as many people talking about her compared to other like small town romance authors, and I think if you like small town romance, you would definitely like Catherine Cowles, so recommend both of these. Next up we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is such a popular fantasy book, and I feel like if you loved this, you should try Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is my new obsession. This series is called the Kindred Curse series. It definitely has hype. Like, people definitely know about this series. I'm not discovering some really tiny little series that no one's ever read, but I do think it deserves more hype. I do think more people should read it because I am obsessed. I rated the second book 5 stars. I didn't rate the first book 5 stars, but I did rate it 4.25. So I still loved it, and I thought it was a great setup to the series. And I feel like we needed this book to be able to like really get into it in book 2 and hopefully the rest of the series as well. But I really think that if you like this, you need to try this, because in Powerless we have 2 groups of characters. We have the elites and the mundanes. The elites have these like special gifts whilst the mundanes don't. The elites kind of hold all of the power, whereas the mundanes do not. The elites kind of live in these castles and have all of these privileges, I guess, whereas the mundanes kind of live in poverty. And in this series we have the descended and the mortals. And again, the descended have powers, the mortals don't. The descended have way more control and kind of like say over what's happening in the kingdom, whereas the mortals don't. It's a very similar power dynamic and like setup in terms of the types of characters that we have. In both of these stories we have a female main character who totally underestimates their own abilities. In both series we have an incredible romance, a bit of like a grumpy kind of morally grey guy in both of these, and both of them are princes, and both female main characters definitely shouldn't be falling for the prince, but they definitely are. I feel like Powerless is kind of famous or like known for the whole trials element, and that doesn't really happen in this book. There's definitely something in the second book that kinda could be compared to that, but as a whole they definitely do have differences in terms of their actual plot line, but there are some similarities. And I think the biggest thing for me is the tension between the main characters and like the love interests is so good in both of them. There are definitely like more similarities than that, but I don't want to share because they could be seen as spoilers and I don't want to spoil anything. But I really think if you liked Powerless, please read this series because it is so good. If you've been really wanting that like tension and that angst and that, I don't know, that dynamic between the 2 main characters, you definitely need to read Kindred Curse. Next up we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, an oldie but a goodie. And I think if you liked this one and you've been looking for something similar, you definitely need to read Truly Devious. I do feel like this is pretty well known, but again, if you liked this, I really think you'd like this. Both of them are YA mysteries and both of them are a part of a series. In A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, our main character is looking back at a case that happened in her small town, honestly not that long ago, but she thinks the wrong person was blamed, and so as part of a school project, she is looking into it and trying to actually find the perpetrator. Whereas in Truly Devious, our main character Stevie has started at this new boarding school, and students only get to go there if they have some sort of like special interest or special skill that they want to develop, and the whole point of this school is that they will foster these skills and talents and try and kind of make these kids into the greatest they can be and just give them every resource or teaching that they need to be able to fulfill that dream. However, many years ago at this school there was a kidnapping, and now it's many years later, it's a cold case, no one ever really found out what happened, but Stevie's special interest is this case and it is true crime, so she is trying to solve this case. So in both books we are following a teenage girl who is basically a detective trying to figure out what actually happened with these situations. Both of them are fast paced, both of them have a bit of a romance subplot, both of them are part of series, both of them have great side characters. So I think if you've read this, you've got to try this. I love this series. If you read One Dark Window and loved it and you want to read something that has similar energy, I recommend The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. These are both Gothic fantasies, so they have that really eerie kind of melancholic undertone to them. Both stories just have this kind of like dark and mysterious vibe to them. They also both have very interesting and unique magic systems. One Dark Window's magic system works around like playing cards, whereas The 13th Child kind of works more so around like the spirits. Like there are a few spirits and they kind of hold different powers. In One Dark Window, our main character has this kind of like voice inside her head and she calls it Nightmare, and this voice kind of like tells her what she shouldn't do, and it kind of protects her. And in this book, our main character ends up teaming up with the king's nephew and ends up kind of spending a lot of time with the royal family. And kind of along the same lines, in The 13th Child, our main character is born into this family, but there are too many kids. She's the 13th child, and so her family basically lets her get adopted, and the person that adopts her isn't really a person at all, but is actually like the spirit of death. So this spirit of death basically raises her and kind of protects her. And also in this book, our main character ends up having to go to the castle and ends up getting involved in the royal family as well. So they both kind of have similar aspects to them, but they are very different stories and very different plot lines, but they definitely have a similar vibe to me. If you read Just for the Summer and loved it, I feel like this one is pretty well known, but I think you should read Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. These definitely give me the same energy. Again, they are different in a lot of ways, but they have a similar vibe. So in Just for the Summer, our characters meet, not actually planning to date each other. It's kind of like a fake dating sort of scenario at the beginning. Our female main character is a traveling nurse, and she ends up deciding to spend the summer in the location where our male main character is located, and they will spend the summer together and then go their separate ways. That's kind of like the setup they decide on fairly early on. And similarly in Summer Romance, our female main character is not looking for love whatsoever. She has just ended her marriage, so she is now a divorcee, and she just wants to have a fun summer. She kind of just wants to enjoy herself a little bit, kind of have a bit more freedom, and she meets this guy and they end up hitting it off. And so she kind of thinks, hey, why not just enjoy his company for the summer, have a little bit of a summer romance, why not? I'm not going to put any pressure on it. We're just going to have a fun summer and then go our separate ways. So in both stories, we're looking at just kind of like a summer fling with no plans of it really going anywhere. And of course, in both stories, characters catch feelings and it's not really just a summer thing anymore. The stories themselves are quite different, but both of them have that really good balance of general fiction or like chick lit mixed with romance. Like you see a lot of character development in both of our female main characters, honestly both of our male main characters as well, but it's a lot more than just a romance. There are also family dynamics in both stories. I just feel like if you liked this, you've got to try this, or vice versa. Both of these are 5-star reads for me. I love them both so much, so if you haven't read either of them, I definitely think you need to. Another oldie but a goodie is Six of Crows. This is a YA fantasy book. I feel like if you haven't heard of this, you might be living under a rock because this is just such a famous, well-known book. But in this book, we are following a group of criminals who are all experts in their field, and they come together with Kaz, our leader, to complete this huge heist. So it's predominantly a heist story, but there's a lot more to it than that. There are some really great dynamics between characters. There's a little bit of romance. Like there's a bit of everything in this book. And I think if you liked that book, you should try A Tempest of Tea. This is also a heist story. It's also YA. It is a very different vibe to Six of Crows. In Six of Crows, we have a mastermind main character, Kaz, and he's kind of like heading up the whole mission, organizing everything, and he is always like 3 steps ahead of every other character. And in A Tempest of Tea, we also have a mastermind main character, Arthi, and she owns this tea house that becomes a blood house for vampires at night. And this blood house is where everyone comes and like spills all their secrets and kind of like networks. So she knows everyone's business. So again, she is a mastermind. She kind of just knows everything. She's always a couple steps ahead, but her tea house is getting threatened, and the only way that she can kind of keep it safe and keep it going is if she teams up with essentially her like nemesis and creates this like gang or crew of really skilled individuals to be able to complete this mission that she needs to complete. So again, similar vibes, different stories, different characters, different kind of like subplots, but if you liked this, I'd recommend this. It's also really short, and I think the second book in this series might come out this year as well. I need to check on that, but I'm very excited to continue this series. If you read Happy Place and loved it and want a somewhat similar story, you need to read The X-Files. I feel like this is the closest I've come to feeling the way I felt in Happy Place, because I guess it's a somewhat similar situation. In Happy Place, we are following 2 exes who have broken up, but they haven't told all of their friends that they've broken up, and they've decided to keep their breakup a secret until after their last like annual friends vacation. So they go on a vacation with their best friends every year, the same group, the same people, and it's like everyone's favorite thing to do. So they don't want to ruin the trip by telling them they've broken up, so they're pretending to be together for that trip. And it ends up being a bit of a second chance romance, you know, like these 2 exes who ended their relationship because they didn't really think it could work are kind of reconsidering things, and you get flashbacks to when they were together and when they were happy. This is truly one of my favorite books of all time, and whilst I don't think this is quite as good as Happy Place, I do think it is such a beautiful romance, and it is still worth the read. In this book, we are following, again, 2 exes who used to be together. They're not together anymore. However, they kind of grew up together. So they were like childhood friends before they were lovers. And in their original friendship group, there were 3 of them. It was the 2 exes, the guy and the girl, and then their other best friend, Adam. And Adam is getting married, and our 2 main characters are both heavily involved in the wedding. So now they have to spend quite a lot of time together at a place that they spent a lot of time at when they were growing up. So it's bringing back all of the memories and all of those like falling in love feelings. So both of these are like a forced proximity, second chance romance, exes to lovers kind of situation, or at least like both of them are like friends to lovers to exes to maybe lovers. Who knows what will happen at the end, but they're both just very like heartfelt romances, and they both kind of just deal with, or at least they discuss a lot of like real life things that couples have to go through. Like life isn't always perfect, life can be really hard, and so when you're going through a lot as an individual, what does that mean for your relationship? So again, if you read Happy Place and loved it, I really recommend The X-Files. Next we have Fourth Wing. I feel like this series is obviously so well loved, and I feel like this is a book that a lot of people read and then go, oh my gosh, I love reading. Like, I didn't realize how much I loved reading until I read this book, and then they're like, what do I read next? So if you are someone who read Fourth Wing and kind of wants something somewhat similar, my recommendation is Akane by Lynette Noni. These are very different stories, but I think if you want to feel a similar feeling to Fourth Wing, I recommend trying this series. In terms of similarities, Fourth Wing follows a main character who thought she was a very normal, very average girl. Akane follows a girl who didn't even know magic existed and then kind of just finds herself in a magical world, and it turns out she has a magical ability that she didn't even realize. Both series do have dragons. There's not as many dragons in the Madoran Chronicles, but there are some. I wouldn't go into it for the dragons, but there definitely are dragons, and I think the relationship between dragon and rider is honestly similar. There's a romance subplot in both series. There's great found family in both series, great side characters in both series. Both of these series start off at a magical school setting but end up kind of leaving that setting, and the world kind of expands past that point. There are honestly a lot of other similarities too. Again, don't go into Akane expecting the exact same situation as Fourth Wing. Like, they are very much their own series in their own right, but if you want a series that you can just become extremely consumed by, you can just fall in love with, you can fall in love with the side characters, great plot, I think you should try the Madoran Chronicles. I feel like it's quite underrated. In saying that, I think it probably had more hype when it was like actually coming out, because I do know this is a popular series, but like if you've only started reading in the last few years and you want to have a similar feeling, I definitely think it's worth a try, especially because the next book in the Empyrean series doesn't come out for what, over a year or something. So if you're looking for something in the meantime to really just delve into, I think you should try the Madoran Chronicles. And finally, if you liked People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, I think you should read Last Time We Met by Emily Houghton. Again, this is a book that is severely underrated. I read this a couple of years ago. It was a 5-star read for me, and I'm so shocked that I don't hear more about it. It also has like hardly any ratings on Goodreads. I'm so shocked because this gives major Emily Henry vibes to me. The reason why I'm comparing it to People We Meet on Vacation is because both books follow best friends, like a guy and a girl best friend, and in both books these best friends have these promises to each other, and then in both books something goes wrong. Their friendship kind of falls apart a little bit, but they end up coming back together and may or may not fall in love. In People We Meet on Vacation, we're following Alex and Poppy, and they go on these trips every year together, but 2 years ago they went on a trip and everything kind of fell apart, and as the reader you don't really know why or what happened until later in the story, but we know that they used to be best friends, something happened, they're not as close as they used to be, but now they're going on one more trip together, and you kind of just see what happens. And in Last Time We Met, we follow these best friends who grew up together, did everything together, and planned on just like doing life together, like going to uni together, living near each other, and they both said that if they were single by a certain age they would end up getting married, but they only ever really planned to be like best friends. But then you find out that they haven't talked in a really long time, and you don't really know why, but you just know that they're not best friends like they used to be. But now they've been brought back together for a specific situation, and they're kind of like, can we still be friends with everything that's happened in this time where we haven't talked? Like, we're such different people, we've changed so much, our lives are going different directions, like do we even have anything in common anymore? It's honestly a very like real, raw kind of story. It's very heartfelt, it's a beautiful story, and I just loved it when I read it. I need to do a reread actually, because I feel like it's been a long time since I read this, but I actually preferred it to People We Meet on Vacation. So if you want that kind of like friends to lovers, bit of like a falling out, bit of like a what actually happened kind of thing, I definitely recommend Last Time We Met. But those are all of the books that I have to talk about today. I hope this was somewhat interesting. If you did enjoy this, let me know, and maybe we can make this a bit of a series, because I'm sure I have so many other recommendations where that came from. And like I said, if I read a book and love it, I am desperately searching for another book that will give me that same feeling. So hopefully some of my recommendations may possibly give you that same kind of feeling as well. And of course, if you have any books where it's like, if you read this, you should read this, leave your recommendations in the comments below, because not only can we kind of give recommendations to each other, but you guys can also give me recommendations, which I'm always on the lookout for. But I love you guys so much. I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.